What is up, everybody? Bobby here, the Geek Guru. Geek, definitely guru. I don't know. But today we're going to do something totally different. We're going to start a new series. It's going to be called Bob, Bobby, and Batman. You can see Batman behind us. And so basically what it is this is my dad. And I kind of wanted to introduce him into this whole YouTubing sensation. And he's been watching a couple of videos and he's liked it. And we're both big fans of Batman. Like, there's a lot of things that I've taken from him in life. Like, partly I like to think that my work ethic I take after him, and my art I've drawn all my life. He taught me how to draw. And then the biggest thing I think that we have in common is Batman.
I thought it was good looks. All right.
I don't think I got the good look gene.
I did.
Good God.
I'm looking at,
egotistical too.
I'm looking at the video. Mm-hmm. I can see on the thing there, and I'm looking from a distance. Yeah. And I just realized, I said, Jesus Christ, I look like Stan Lee.
You're old. What we're going to do is, I don't know how I'm going to break it up at this point. I don't know whether it's going to be once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, whatever it is. But every time we sit down, we're going to discuss something related to Batman. Whether it be, if it's something somewhat related, if we can connect it to Batman, that'll be the topic that we're discussing, more or less. With it being our first episode, I kind of wanted to talk to you about how you got into Batman. Mm-hmm. What was your introduction into Batman? How did you start, because my introduction was you. That obviously you kind of, not necessarily pushed him on me or anything like that, but you introduced me to comics at a very young age, and you would draw occasionally. You didn't draw a lot when I was a kid. I remember when I was real little, I remember you drew a lot. As I got a little bit older, I want to say like anywhere from 7 to 9, you had the business and you were just wrapped up with the business, so your drawing kind of went down quite a bit. But that was more or less me, and then but I don't want to get into me just yet. I wanted to talk about you. Where did you get introduced into Batman? What's your first memory of Batman?
My first memory of Batman was basically, we lived in Long Island in Queens, and I was probably 10 years old. And believe it or not, the comics back then, that's going back 90 years ago, was 12 cents. Yeah. And my grandmother would take us, like on the weekends, we would stay over with her. And the big thing that she always did was, after she got done work in the laundromat, she would take me and Lorraine, my sister, and take us over to the fountain, what they called the fountain back then, and which was basically a store. And they always had Superman and Batman comics.
Now, when you say fountain in a store, is it kind of like an ice cream shop?
Yeah, it was. Well, what it was that there's a fountain there. Yeah. And then I guess they had other things. All I remember out of the fountain was the fountain where you could sit and have ice cream, and the guy would do. The fountain was where you got soda, ice cream soda, stuff like that.
Yeah, stuff like that.
But they had this one area where there was comics. Okay. And somewhere along that line, I don't remember where, I became fascinated with comics. And basically I assume it was every month, Superman would come out and Batman would come out. And then they also had Detective Comics. Yeah, Detective Comics. And my grandmother would always give us, let me buy a comic. And
now, were you reading anything other than Batman, or was it just Batman and Superman?
Actually, it was Batman and Superman. I never read anything. I never cared for Flash, or I believe at the time Flash was out, Aquaman. Something about that, I never really got into those. Mm-hmm. But actually, I kind of digress. My aunt, Aunt Kathy, would actually read me Batman comics when I couldn't read.
Oh, wow.
And I can actually remember sitting in the chair next to her, and she would read the comics to me. And I forgot about that. As we're talking, it just came to me. Yeah. So how old are you when you don't even know how to read?
Yeah.
And she was actually reading them to
5 or 6. Well, in your generation, I mean, nowadays they're getting to read much younger.
Yeah.
I think I was in first grade.
Yeah, it was something like that. And she actually would sit there and read it. And the thing, we still talk about it to this day, she would... she'd get bored reading me these comics, and she'd start making voices. And she would come up with these different voices, and I would get upset and start yelling at my grandmother. She's doing it again, and my grandmother would yell at her, and she would, and when I think about it, Kathy at the time, I mean, Kathy's old now, but back then, Kathy was probably like 15, 16 years old.
Oh, wow, okay.
And but that was my actual introduction to it. And then when I got to the point where I could actually read, I always collected the comic books. And that's basically how it started. And that was, like I said, Christ almighty, that was back in the 50s.
Now, when you...
And Bob Kane was, of course, doing
Bob Kane was, yeah. Now, when you read all those years, where was your... Did you have a drop-off point?
Yes. I still remember one of the last comics I had read of Batman was it was in the mid '60s, and it was I think you have the comic, the famous one.
Oh, the two-way death trap.
Yeah, he's in he's in that box of walls, 4 walls, and the water's coming up. And he's treading water, and there's a machine gun on top shooting.
Yes.
And I actually drew that, for some reason or other, that whole perspective and that drawing was so fast. I just loved it so much. I drew it a few times.
Yeah.
And that's that was the next progression, was the drawing.
Now, so I know you got into drawing and all that stuff. Is that what pushed you to draw? Was the comics, or was it something else?
No, actually, it was. At the time, I guess I didn't realize I was just fascinated by the drawings, and maybe it was an artistic thing that was inside of me that was trying to come out. But I can remember at a very early age sitting there trying to draw Batman and Robin, and Batman's easy.
Yeah,
and Robin
was always a little bit.
Robin was always a difficult one to draw, and of course the bodies. And if you remember back then, the detail was nothing like it is today.
Nothing like today.
And when they came out with those comics, they were like from the 50s and the early 60s, and very little detail, and very little story.
They were almost like the newspaper comics, but back then the newspaper comics had a lot of detail compared to today. Today they're just cream puff nonsense. Where back then they mirrored each other, and because you would read Batman in the newspapers.
Yeah, I think
Spider-Man as well.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if I remember Batman being in the comics or the funny papers, but I do remember certain ones were in there. But I don't remember Batman. But it was just this thing where I decided I had to draw Batman, and that's how I actually started to draw.
So in the '60s, you kind of dipped off. When, and we've had this discussion numerous times, but '66, the TV show, that was like at the time, and the way you've always described it to me was that lead-in to that, the promos, I guess you would call it, or the teasers leading in. You told me, as a kid, you were excited.
Oh, yeah.
Because they would just show, like, the cars.
Well, they just show the car going into the Batcave.
Yeah.
And maybe something else, but it was so exciting to see that in 1966 that they were finally going to have a TV show of Batman.
Yeah.
Didn't know anything about Adam West, didn't know anything about Burt Ward, didn't know anything about any of that. Yeah. And then they finally came out with the series. I couldn't stand it. And to this day, I have never watched an episode. It was so disappointing to me. And then it just got... And I know they consider that campy today, and but even to this day, when I see Adam, what the hell is his name?
Adam West.
He's 120, and he's still doing the Batman thing.
Well, he just started back. I think here's what I think, and I think there's a lot of revisionist history to this show, where now all of a sudden it's this cool thing. But I think a lot of that has to do with Family Guy. And what I mean by that is, me as a kid, I remember being a real little kid and it being on. It appeals to little kids.
Oh, yeah.
Because they see the bright colors and they see that boom and bang and the cartoon at the beginning and all that. So for a little kid, it appeals to you.
Yeah.
But when you get old enough that you realize this is horrible. It's campy. They're going for a humor side of it. It's not a serious take on it. There's cool things about it. You know, the Batmobile is awesome.
The Batmobile was cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Some of the things they did with the Bat phone, with how it would ring red, and they would pull the statue and the bookcase would open up and they would jump in and go down into the Batcave. That stuff. There were some cool things about it. I feel like, and I can only imagine you as a kid hearing. And it's different because nowadays, like when they cast somebody for a role, you hear about it immediately, and people then criticize before they even see the role portray or whatever. But they had great actors on that show. You know, Burgess Meredith and Cesar Romero and all these guys were. But even the fact that like Cesar Romero wouldn't even shave his mustache to play the role.
Yeah.
You look at things like that and you go, even they didn't really take it seriously.
No.
And there was, so for me, I look at it and I go, when you hit that age where you realize this is really garbage and you turn on it and you go a different direction, then, I think what happened was people turned on it. They didn't even acknowledge it all through the 80s, especially when the 89 Batman hit. Then it continued on and nobody... But I think when Adam West showed up on Family Guy, he played Mayor West. I think people started to go, oh, this guy's cool. And then they started to accept him again.
Is that right?
That's my feeling. Because now it's like, it's all over the place. And they act like it's the greatest thing ever. And I think, listen... You can be revisionist history and look back and say it's the greatest thing ever. But history shows us that it almost killed comic books. Like, they dived. Because what happened was there was a spike, a lot of a success, and the show was all over the place.
Yeah.
And then when people realized this is trash, it totally... The comic books... Because the comics, when it took off and went up, comics started to mirror that. And they were doing some of the same things in the comics that they were on the TV show, and then when the TV show boom died, it started going, and it went the other way, and to the point where Batman almost died. Like, now that was in '66. I think the show only lasted 2 years, if I'm not mistaken.
It
wasn't long.
Oh, the worst was when they were climbing up the wall.
They talked to celebrities,
and then a celebrity would pop out of there, and they would talk to celebrities and all. I think the biggest problem, other than the show was crap, was. Burt Ward actually looked like Robin and somewhat built with that outfit, But Adam West, I guess the technology back then, they couldn't give him a muscle suit that looked really... And they just had him in it. Yeah. And it was like...
The suit looked like the comics.
Yeah, but
the suit looked like it was ripped from the comics.
But he had tights on.
Yeah, well, of course.
And it was like, oh my God, this is awful. And it was so disappointing.
So now, like I said, it went down. It wasn't until the 70s when Neil Adams, they got Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams working on the book. Denny O'Neil wrote the book, Neil Adams drew, and that's when it started to come back because they started, in listening to conversations, they took on the perspective of, well, this ain't going to be, because they're basically told when they get the jobs, this book isn't going to be around in a year. So they looked at it and was like, okay, well, nobody really gives a damn. We're going to throw everything we can at it. And they got more of an edgier tone to it. They redefined it, rebooted it in terms of today. And that's when it really started to take off. And then in the 80s, the early 80s, I want to say 84, 85, that's when I started reading. And that's when Frank Miller...
Well, I bought... If I'm not mistaken, I bought you the Frank Miller Dark Knight for Christmas. Yeah.
And you know what's funny? I think that if you knew then what you were giving me, you probably wouldn't have given it to me. And the reason why I say that is it was more of an edgier tone, and it might have been before my time. But I think as a parent looks at it and goes, oh, that's Batman, no big deal, and they give it to him. But I don't think you truly knew what I was getting. Now, I started, because I was reading Batman the comic right around that time.
Right.
I remember Mom used to take me and Tony grocery shopping every Saturday morning. And we went down, after she would go shopping, sometimes she would go down to the Groveland Center to drop off dry cleaning.
Oh, okay.
And there was a drugstore down there.
Yeah.
And so what happened was one day, Mom took me and Tony grocery shopping. Afterwards, she said, I got to go down to the Groveland Center. And then afterwards, I think she went into the drugstore for something. And I was looking at the comics, and I was just looking at them. And she walked up and said, do you want one? And I said, am I allowed to? She said, yeah, go ahead. So I picked up Batman. And the reason why was because I knew you liked Batman. I thought, growing up, I think every boy does this, you want to impress your father. And you want your dad to go, oh, that's, you want. So in my mind, I'm thinking, I want Batman because my dad told me about Batman. But I want my dad to go, oh, this is awesome. And kind of share that experience with him. So I go home, and I remember showing you were like, oh, Batman's cool. And so I got the reaction I wanted out of it. But the book I actually bought was, and I just happened to be getting in at the time when DC was rebooting everybody. And they were starting Superman and Wonder Woman back off at number 1. Batman they didn't touch. They left Batman where he was. But it was a start over for Batman as well. Frank Miller did that particular book that I got. Yeah. That was the year 1 book. And it was like basically showing you how Batman got started. So
the funny thing about the Frank Miller thing was it brought it in the dark. It was dark again.
Yes.
But the funny thing about it is I never really cared for the artwork.
The artwork was different.
Yeah. And
it was definitely
totally different.
Yeah.
And
but he drew it as well.
Yeah, and that was fine. Because if you look at it, if you actually stopped and looked at the artwork in a different perspective and not put it in kind of like the artwork they do today, and was it Jim Lee and stuff like that, it was totally different, and it didn't make Batman look real impressive, but later on when I went back and I read the book again and I looked at it from a different perspective, and almost an abstract type of thing, and it was actually cool.
The things that he did in that book, it's a bigger, and I heard this weekend, I never looked at it in that perspective, but they say it's more of a Superman book than it is a Batman book. And the reason why they say this, if you read the book, basically superheroes are squashed. There is no superheroes. Superman's the only superhero, but he works for the United States government. He works for Ronald Reagan. And when that book came out, we're in the middle of the Cold War. There was no peace with Russia at the time. So Reagan's the president, Gorbachev is the president of Russia, and there's that big nuclear battle going on, and there's a scene where the Russians are shooting missiles, and Superman goes up and gets the missiles and takes them into outer space and all that stuff. And but Batman starts coming back in Gotham, and he's making a noise. And Superman comes out to him and is like, "You need to stop." And a lot of people look at it as, and again, I never looked at this perspective until a couple weeks ago, but it's more or less Batman saying to Superman, get your shit together. This isn't who you are. You don't work for the government. You're supposed to protect the people, not the government. I'm working for the people. You're working for the government. Then they wind up having that big knockdown, drag out fight in it. And so to me, that was like, when I was a kid, that to me, I'm looking at these pages and I'm like, holy cow, this is just awesome. And it got me reading, and then really got me drawing. I also had a point where I dropped off and I stopped reading, and I think that was right after high school. I want to say it was, I think I graduated high school and I stopped, but I always kind of went back. And then it wasn't until I think I was like 30 when I started collecting the statues. And that was my way of like, hey, the money I would spend on comic books, I could buy statues, and that's more accepted than reading a comic book at my age. And but then what happened was the New 52 came out, and then I started reading again because they kind of restarted everything and rebooted. But I fell in love. Honestly, what happened to me was I fell in love with the art style.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I'll read the books, but I'm more just flipping through, looking at the art, and it comes from a different perspective. I think from being someone that can draw,
Yeah.
I just fall in love with these art styles, and I don't care who you are. You've said it to me many times that like you look at a Batman book and the cities.
Oh, the cityscapes are amazing.
It's unreal how well drawn that, and it's almost like the writer on Batman now, Scott Snyder. He says the city is a character.
Oh, without a doubt.
Character of its own.
The perspective that they draw of those cities and the lighting of the cities is just I've always found amazing, and almost like you do that. It's almost like, to me, it's from being also drawn. To me, it's almost like it's two pictures in one.
Yeah.
The cityscape with the gargoyles or whatever is an art in itself.
Yes.
And then the second part of that art is the Batman character in there.
Yes.
And how is the cape flowing, and what's
Because the
it
capes
doing?
are always huge.
The capes is always, if they ever in real life had a cape that long,
Yeah.
he'd be tripping all over the place.
And the crazy thing is, they've lost that. That's not. It seemed like in the 80s, the capes got huge, but that was the 80s. Everything was big and bold. Now it seems like they've scaled the capes back quite a bit, and they're not as big as they were. But yeah, that's the one thing I remember too. Is like, I remember scenes of him sitting on top of buildings, and the cape just flowing in the wind, and just really amazing stuff. Back then.
It was.
So now you exit more or less in the 60s.
Yeah.
But I guess he was always in your back of your mind.
Yeah, and the thing was that it got me. It was definitely instrumental in getting me drawn, and that in itself has never left. But that Batman was always instrumental in getting me started to draw. And I think if I remember right, it was instrumental in getting you drawn. And it was always. I always thought it was so weird how that's how I started to draw, and without really impressing on you where to draw, you started with that, and it's just kind of weird how that worked out. I could never deny that you were my kid. Although I've tried a few times, but it didn't work. But that was one of those areas. I was like, oh Christ, I guess he's mine.
Yeah.
But no, it's so funny because it just. We talked about it before, where you got in a habit of drawing Batman, and you were popping them out like a factory.
Yeah. And
then one day you came to me with another Batman drawn, and you remember what I said to you, and I wasn't trying to be cruel.
No, but you said the words that I needed, and more or less it was, "What is this shit?"
Yeah.
And I was like thrown back, and you were like, "I'm tired of seeing Batman. Enough of the Batman. I don't want to see. Don't show me another picture you draw with Batman." And in my mind, I walked away because, like I said earlier, as a young man, as a boy, you're trying to impress your father.
Sure.
You want your father's acceptance, and especially with me, where I knew you could draw. And to me, at that age, I always felt like you were the best artist that I knew.
I still am, but that's okay.
I mean, when I looked at comic books, I always felt you could draw a comic book. I felt like you were on the level of the guys I was looking up to. I felt like there was no doubt in my mind that you could pick up and you could go work for DC tomorrow. When I was a kid, that's how I always felt. like. So for me, you telling me...
Not to interrupt you, that was something I would always love to have done. And
times are different, though.
Yeah, but the problem was that I was married. I had you and your brother, and I had responsibility.
But I think too, times were different. There wasn't that go get your dreams mentality. It was, okay, you got a family, go to work, and that's your,
Yeah.
that's your life.
You guys have always been like a noose around my neck my whole life. Never had a chance to do
That's
my
all right.
dreams.
That's all right, you prick. I'm going to take this to...
Because you little bastards were always hanging on.
What a prick. So, but more or less, basically, what that did, though, was it pushed me to go draw my own stuff. Because I did. I went into the bedroom, and I went through different emotions. My first was, fuck him.
Yeah, geez.
Who the fuck is he talking to?
You didn't say that to me, though.
No, I didn't say it to you. I said it to myself in the bedroom.
What do you think would have happened if you said that to me?
I got fucking knocked out.
That's true.
So, but then it was like, well, I'll show him. And then I started drawing my own stuff, and then I brought that back to you, and you were like, what's this? And I said, I drew it. You said, where did you get it from? I said, no, I made it up. And you said, good, keep it up. And then at that point, I never copied another picture again. I drew everything from my mind. So thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. The fuck you staring at me for?
Because I just found out I ain't getting paid. Yes, I did.
The fuck you found that out a couple weeks ago.
Christ.
I don't get paid. You want to get paid? When I start getting paid, we'll talk about your salary.
Okay. I have no makeup or wardrobe person on this. I have nothing.
Tony's slacking. She's out there
Jesus Christ.
trying to maintain the fucking dog.
No makeup, no nothing. I don't get a dime. I don't get nothing.
I don't know. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at The Geek Gurus, Facebook.com/The Geek Gurus. That is all. Got any more bitching you want to do?
Yeah, I'm not getting paid.
Peace, mother.